Well, welcome everybody. Here is a Clocking the Gallop special. And I say it's special because it's away from the day-to-day tipping. It's away from our personality profiles of locked and loaded. But perhaps it's one of the most important interviews that we're likely to do on this network, because we're talking about thinking out of the box. How do we take horse racing forward in a new world, not just in South Africa, but across the planet? And to talk through that is a man who is on the forefront of something here in South Africa that might be the prototype for the way forward. You might recognize him, hopefully you do. It's Angus Campbell, founder of Campbell and Campbell, but he's also been very heavily involved in the Summer Cup. We'll touch on that. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you, Angus. Angus Campbell, welcome to Clocking the Gallop.
Hi, Neil. Good to see you.
So let's get straight into it. And we look back really at saying, where is racing at the moment? And in South Africa, obviously, because of the breakdown of Phumelela and the problems that have ensued, and dare I say, also in Gold Circle, it's quite evident that racing's in a tough place. But I suppose we're not alone, because across the planet, whether it be Australia or Hong Kong or the UK, we've seen similar kind of figures. So we're saying, or you're saying, racing perhaps has to take a chance now, relook at itself and brand itself for a new audience and a new market.
Yeah, completely. So I think what some people think is that when they see what we're trying to do with Triple Eight Racing, they think we're trying to address a uniquely South African problem, because South African horse racing is in so many, is dealing with so many issues. But essentially, horse racing around the world is dealing with similar issues. So for me, the biggest three threats to racing are ones that are very seldom addressed, and that is animal welfare, reliance on betting, and basically entertainment. So, and these are things that even as we're restructuring horse racing in South Africa at the moment, these things are not being addressed.
So let's break them down then, shall we? Let's start with animal rights, because that was interesting. Obviously, there was no, but at this year's Vodacom Durban July, Supersport presented it from our studios in Johannesburg. But last year, I remember getting to the course, and there was quite a significant amount of people with banners outside, waving them around. Being obviously a racing person, and I read a lot of those banners, I realized a lot of it came from ignorance. But perhaps that's not the point. The point is that they are out there and they need to be addressed, and perhaps racing should make the first move.
100%. So I think let's start with dog racing in the States. Many people said that dog racing was always going to be in the States. Dog racing has been outlawed in the States, and animal rights activists in the States have now targeted horse racing. So this is an issue whether we like it or not. Now, the problem with horse racing community is they love horses so much. They're so passionate about their sport, and they care so much about the horses that they try and rationally explain to people how the sport operates, etc. The problem with the modern audience is they don't work on reason and ration. They work on social media, which is all about feeling. So you can't explain how many times you can use a whip, etc. You need to have a passionate audience fighting in your corner, but you can't not address these issues. So we need to build up millions and thousands and millions of new fans who are fighting for the sport. This issue is not going to go away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the very connotation of whip is negative. If you call it a persuader, which fundamentally is what it is, because horses are guided, and we all know that there's tough legislation in terms of excessive use of the whip. But the point is irrelevant anyway. Even if you do have a persuader or whatever, if the perception is with the audience and people out there is that it's cruel. We might know it's not, but as you say, it isn't. So I'm just trying to see where we go here, because I want to also get to Triple Eight Racing, but I want to ask, which we will do. But Triple Eight Racing going forward, you probably therefore like to see no use of the whip, or no whip at all.
Yeah, so I mean, there might be a whip in the jockey's hand, because as you say, it might be used for control, but there will probably never ever be a Triple Eight race where a horse is hit with a whip. And again, that is not about a racing issue or whatever. It is about a perception issue amongst a new younger generation.
Yeah. Okay, got you. So that's the one thing that we need to be on the front foot with. I totally agree with you. The next fear that you have, the next negative for racing as you see it.
Okay, so I mentioned a dependence on betting revenue. So what a lot of racing people say to me is that I'm attacking the fact that betting sponsors racing. I'm not saying that. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying we need to fight to keep betting revenue with horse racing, because in the last year, I believe globally betting revenue went up a tremendous amount, but not for horse racing. It went up on other sports, rugby, cricket, soccer, etc. So as betting revenue is increasing, horse racing revenue from betting is actually going down. So I'm saying we need a weapon to keep that betting revenue with horse racing. And secondly, we need other betting streams, other revenue streams. And by that, I mean merchandising, sponsorship, team ownership, all the other things that other sports businesses rely on to grow their businesses. It's my opinion that you can't have one main revenue stream, i.e. betting, sponsoring or supporting the whole of racing. We need to become a global business, sports business. And for me, that means looking at other revenue streams and keeping betting with horse racing.
So all of this is making a lot of sense to me. It also is obvious that we're in a new millennium. We've got younger, more active kids, and not even kids, but younger adults who are consuming their media completely differently, and they want different things. I suspect the same way with test match cricket, that maybe the young generation don't want to go for 5 days and sit and watch 6-7 hours of cricket. The same probably can be said for younger, and dare I say in South Africa, black audiences that want to go racing and want to see pace, passion, fashion, all of these things. And we're trying to appeal, or you're trying to appeal to a younger, predominantly black audience, because that's obviously where South Africa's at.
Yeah, so in South Africa, that's the case. So I think the starting point is many sports businesses around the world have been in exactly the same position over the last 30 years. The world has changed rapidly, and these sports businesses had to get their act together. So if you look at cricket, for example, T20 cricket was put together by a marketing company in the UK. Okay, and they found, as many different companies have found, there are 3 key elements to getting these younger people or a younger audience or a new audience to watch a sport. One, they're not going to sit for 7 or 8 hours, whether it's on their phone or whether it's at home or at a venue. They want something that's shorter. Secondly, they needed to be fast-paced. Thirdly, they needed to be understandable. So if you look at test match cricket, it's quite complicated. It's quite difficult to understand. T20 cricket is very simple. Same thing with horse racing. It is quite difficult. It's quite complicated. It's not something that you're going to understand straight away. So our 888 racing, again, fast-paced, short format, easy to understand, and then the last part, entertaining. It has to be, whatever this new sport is, it has to be hugely entertaining, mind-blowingly entertaining. And I like to talk about the example of darts. I mean, darts now, I'm saying that in darts. This is what used to be a bunch of guys in a pub throwing darts at a wall. That is now watched in Alexander Palace by up to 40,000 people live, and millions of people are watching those games around the world. I mean, this is darts. I mean, what they did is they made it accessible, easy to understand, and they put it on platforms that a massive audience could get into. So those various things that I've mentioned are not something that I've come up with. These are what smart business and marketing brains have developed.
Well, you're so right about darts, because back in the day when I was growing up in the UK in the 70s, these guys were 140 kilogram. I've got to be careful how I say them. Let's say they weren't exactly slim and trim, and they were pretty good with the old beer mugs. And I used to laugh because the guy used to say, as he got a bullseye, said, "What a magnificent athlete this man is." But they revolutionized with the television, great TV product. Just the whole voicing over of 180 and the screaming and the shouting. And then perhaps most significantly from that particular sport is they made heroes. So Phil the Power Taylor, who I know very well, and through having worked with a couple of the darts guys, is a real brand. I mean, he has massive following. You're looking to do the same for A, horses, B, jockeys, and perhaps these teams, because in 888 racing, you're racing teams, correct?
Yeah, so 888 racing is a team-based, short format horse racing series. So the team-based is quite important in terms of making it less complicated for a fan who doesn't know anything about racing. So let's look at the jockeys that you've mentioned. So Frankie Dettori, everybody knows who Frankie Dettori is, but when you're watching him, you don't really know what shirt he's wearing or what silks he's wearing. because every single race he's wearing different colors depending on which horse he's riding. So even as somebody who kind of knows a bit about racing, I struggle to find Frankie Dettori in a field. So we've simplified that through the team-based format, which means our audience, again, not a traditional racing audience, can either watch on their phones or come to a live event and they'll support their team. So there'll be 8 teams. That opens up a host of new things. You have merchandising, you can have your team colors. And these are things that racing has never addressed before. So there's a whole bunch of revenue that we haven't got in the past. The other thing is the horses. By having a standard 800 meters, all of our horses are basically running over the same distance. So some people will say, well, 800 is too short. Well, anyway, and my response to that is the shortest event at the Olympics is the 100 meters. It lasts for 10 seconds. More people want 100 meters than any other event at the Olympics. So yes, it's short in terms of traditional racing concepts, but in terms of entertainment, it's a lot better for us because all the horses are running over 800 meters, which means at the end of a race meeting, all those horses can be judged against each other. And then you'll have the fastest horse, which becomes the speed freak. And suddenly the speed freak is the horse that everybody's talking about, and whether that's at that series or around the country. So suddenly you can understand who the jockeys are, which team they ride on, which horse is the fastest, and then obviously which team you're going to support going forward.
So let's talk about paradigms and the breaking down of them, because I see that as being part of your challenge. I like to think of myself as a free thinker and wanting to move forward, but I suspect that I might not be completely representative of some of my other colleagues and racing traditionalists. But so you are aware that you're going to have to break some of these paradigms. Having said that, the way I guess to do it is to say to the traditional market, you are not stopping the normal racing. That's going to carry on anyway. This is an alternative product. I like the way you use cricket because Test match cricket continues, the ODI 50 World Cup continues, but IPL revolutionized and therefore brought a lot of new people to cricket and all forms of cricket. So you see this as running parallel. It's a new age, new direction, but it isn't necessarily in competition with what is currently in existence.
Yeah, so you've hit the nail. You've hit the nail on the head. We've already been attacked. We're saying, why are we attacking traditional racing? Why are we attacking the people who've supported us? Because we've been working in horse racing events for 10 years. We've been building the Summer Cup for many years. So I think this comes with the territory. I mean, if you look at Sevens rugby, you've mentioned T20 cricket. These kind of things are going to happen whether the racing community likes it or not. And it's necessary. It needs to happen. Our goal at the end of the day as a business is to build massive horse racing events. I'm not trying to kill racing, as, for example, the animal rights activists are. I'm actually trying to build racing.
Yeah, you wanted to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I need a new market. I need new people coming. I need new investors, new sponsors. I want to see stadiums filled. I want to see millions of new people watching racing, whether it's 888 Racing or the July or the Met or whatever. So yeah, we are aware that our biggest critics, ironically, are going to come from racing. And that was the same for cricket. The biggest critics of T20 cricket were traditional cricketers. So that's gonna happen whether we like it or not. And we're gonna have to take it on the chin and just keep moving on.
Okay, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned about your Summer Cup experience, and I want to congratulate you because I'm aware, having worked with Summer Cup for the last couple of years, how brilliantly you've done there. But in your own experience, Angus, tell us, because I remember you telling me that you got to the first Summer Cup and I think there were 3 people there. It was you, me, and the gate attendant. But over a sustained period of time and slow work, you managed to get a new, young, black elite audience there, which is kind of what we're aiming for. Something like numbers of 15,000, which in the context is excellent. How did you do that? And do you see using that mechanism the same for 888 racing?
Yeah, so I think let's first talk about the Summer Cup. We worked with many different people over the last 10 years because I was literally watching the Summer Cup on TV one year. I saw it was quite empty and I contacted a few people and said, I'm sure we can help fill that race up. Obviously, if I knew then what I know now, I might not have ever made that call. But anyway, we learned from all the different people over the years. So at the time, MegaPro were hosting the event. They were doing loads and loads of innovative things, as were some of the people at Phumelela. It's not like people weren't trying things. Everybody was trying to bring people back to racing. a lot of money and a lot of time was spent on trying to target these different audiences. What we did differently was we were working with a bunch of guys, and they kept coming to us, young black entrepreneurs, saying they've got a big audience, a big following. They can bring those people to the Summer Cup. So I said, great, go ahead, do whatever you want. And then they would always hang around in the meeting, and I'd say, well, why are you still in the meeting? And they'd all say the same thing. They don't have any money. So all we did was we took a bit of our marketing spend, some of our advertising spend, and we reallocated to these guys. So we gave them a basic hospitality space. We gave them some fencing, some toilets, like the bare minimum. Excuse me. They had to then go and do the rest, which they did. And the first year we did that, we only had 3 of these guys, and they brought a couple of 100 people. But by last year, we had 20 of these different guys working on their own hospitality spaces. And that's when we got to almost the 15,000 people. So it wasn't just us, and all the lessons we've learned over the years from all the different groups we've worked with have been vital. But this is my point. We had to give these young guys something. There had to be something in it for them. We had to give them the freedom to build their own brands, make their own money, and work with their own connections. So that's what we did, is we let go of the reins a little bit, and we just supported them, and then we let them do their thing. So that's what we want to do with Triple Eight Racing. As we sell these teams to different team owners, these guys will bring their brands, their channels, their celebs, their followers, far more than we could ever afford to pay for. And they will build the race for us because now they've got something in it for them. It belongs to them. That is the point.
Let's touch on the T word, technology, because we are in a completely different world. And there's no doubt that world, if you harness the technology correctly, and we're all learning about that. I've learned enormously just by starting this Clocking the Gallop channel. Yeah. We've only been going just over 70 days, and we've had 100,000 views, and we've had 1,000 subscribers. But even today, when we were recording this, I learned for the first time how I allow my subject matter to actually record on the other side. So technology is crazy. It's changing all the time. But you have a different spin on technology, Angus. Share some thoughts on that with us.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a different spin, but what I hear all the time is in all the back and forth about opinions on where racing needs to go at the moment, the word technology is always thrown in there, whether it regards betting or punters or racing or the events. The word is very quickly thrown around. So what we're saying is, what exactly do people mean when they say we need to use technology? So for us in Triple Eight Racing, it affects how we film and broadcast the events. Okay, so that means we might need to look at a whole bunch of different platforms that haven't been used before. You know, at the moment you've got one channel on DSTV that's dedicated to horse racing, and there's not much more than that. Yes, you've got guys like yourselves who've all started your YouTube channels, and I think for me that's just the start. We have to look at the audience and what they use. So streaming, how do we stream the events live? How do we stream the events to different platforms, phones, tablets, laptops, etc.? Text, a lot of sports these days have a text commentary running while the actual event is going. So there's a whole host of things that we haven't used yet, which we need to use. The other thing is about data, and I think this is my key point about technology. We haven't, as a racing community, invested enough in human resources of people who understand data, data manipulation, sourcing data, and using that to build the business. So for us, for example, we'll have 888racing.info. Every single race we ever put out will have all the data and all the stats about that race, 888 race, pretty much the same as ESPN Cricket Info does for cricket. So what I'm saying is we have to go further with technology. We haven't done enough as a racing community. There is far more that we can do using data to our benefit.
So if I could just take one part of that, and you talk about live streaming and so forth, and the way racing is shot. So if I come back to the bare essentials of racing, which is the thoroughbred racehorse, yeah. And you want to make jockeys heroes, but also horses heroes. And for this, I think of Japan, where I've seen a lot of footage in Japan. Lyle Hewittson's just come back from there. We touched on that when we spoke to him. That you get literally heroes where people at home, and I'm not talking about 10 people, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people, have got a picture of their favorite horse in the kitchen. And, you know, they supporting not so much the jockey or what price it may be or having any money on it. It's that's their hero. The same way as Sachin Tendulkar might have been a young Indian's hero, the same way now You might get a Tottenham Hotspur fan, Harry Kane's his hero. So we need to work on that as well and shoot it accordingly. So get these beautiful visuals and aerial photographs of racehorses and the racing experience and get it out to a public. Because I think you'd probably agree with me, Angus, that visually as a sport, it's exceptionally appealing.
So I do agree with you up to a point, Neil. So you may, obviously, you know, we've built Equinity as a separate nighttime horse racing event for the last 5 years. So we built that ourselves. And the reason we did that is we wanted to try all these things, all these ideas we've had, we wanted to put them into practice. So we had microphones in the track, we had massive large screens, we had drones, the Teletrack got on board and they provided us with our own feeds, we had our own mixing desks. So what we did is we really, really focused on bringing the racing alive for the audience that we had there. And I don't mean to burst your bubble, but it was limited. The success was limited. And the reason for that is as beautiful as it looked, okay, and the horses looked amazing under the lights at night. People enjoyed the live experience, but they still didn't understand what was going on. And that's why I keep saying you can have all the most wonderful visuals and pictures, etc. But if you don't know one horse from another, one jockey from another, it's still quite hard to make one of those your hero. So for me, we will do all of those things. And we'll keep doing those things. But at the end of doing Equinity for 5 years, we were like, listen, we still haven't achieved success. And why is that? And people were telling us, they said they didn't understand what was going on. It was the time between races was too long, 35 minutes. So they weren't betting professionals. So by the time the next race came along, they'd long since lost interest. They were starting to drink and dance at the bar. And it wasn't entertaining enough for them. They wanted the music to start, the parties, the discos, the DJs. So yes, we can make these horses look beautiful, and they are beautiful, and we can film them in the right way. But until the format of the racing is understandable, we're still not going to have success, in my opinion.
Okay, got you. So that's the starting point, is to create something that a new audience want. Reality show. Do you see any reality opportunities here? Because that seems to be very popular with new people, new audience, and accessible, particularly in South Africa. What are your thoughts there?
So I think a new type of racing, a new format needs to be marketed in a new way. If you look at Formula One, they've had 2 seasons of their Drive to Survive series on Netflix. Now, I'm not someone who's watched Formula One for about 20 years. I've watched that series on Netflix. I'm now hooked on Formula One again. And it's essentially a bunch of camera people following the drivers and the owners, etc., around and interviewing them, but giving them all those different stories. So streaming series are, whether we like it or not, the way to go. And in South Africa, we're uniquely placed where we have many different channels and many different people who want to get involved. So yeah, we'd like to do a reality TV series where we actually auction off, or we don't auction off, we give the 8 teams as prizes to winning event people. So at the moment, event organization companies haven't worked for 5 months. They're desperate. How can we as a racing community help these guys? So we could put up a nice big prize, maybe R1 million, and all these different event companies can apply to sort of a Dragon's Den type reality show where they talk about how they're going to run these different teams for us. Now, what that does for us is we've got all of these young people using the channels that they have, their social media platforms that they have. I mean, I'll give you one example. At the Summer Cup, which we organized for Phumelela, you know, we hired a band for 3 years in a row, and we had a massive halftime show with a couple of hundred performers. At the same time, one of our social pioneers booked Black Coffee for free. Now, Black Coffee was someone we could never afford. He is a multi-superstar DJ from around the world. So here's this young person who goes, well, actually, I happen to know Black Coffee. He's a friend of mine, and he's going to come and play in my hospitality area for free. So those guys bring things to the party that money can't buy as far as we're concerned. So that's where the reality TV and the reality TV type of competition for Triple Eight racing comes in. We have to look at different ways of engaging with this new market.
So where do we go from here? That is, I would normally say the $1 million question, but it's the 888,000 question because you're Triple Eight racing. So 888 question. Where do we go from here? How do you source interest? How do you raise interest if we're not going to get it from within the industry?
Neil, that is a brilliant question, because when we first started floating Triple Eight racing to various parties about 2 years ago, the first thing we were told was you cannot do this without a massive big operator behind you, bankrolling you, supporting you. As you and I all know, that is not a tenable situation currently in South Africa. I mean, Business Rescue for Phumelela, The other bodies are short of cash, sort of funds. So yes, there's a bright new future, but none of us really know what that is. So in the interim, we've had to go and try and source funding from outside of the country. So we're looking at all different options. We've also said, you know what, even if we don't get the money that we need, what we need to do is we need to go and crusade for this change. So whatever happens over the next 6 months, you'll see us at least fighting our corner, putting the word out there, telling people, look, we've been involved in horse racing for 10 years, horse racing events. We're not betting experts, we're not horse experts, but we are event management specialists, and we are horse racing event management specialists. This is what we've learned, and this is what we want as many people to know as possible. And hopefully as we do that crusade, we might find the investors that we need, and then the sponsors, and then obviously the team investors, etc.
Well, on that subject, if somebody is interested, and I know there's a lot of good, clever thinkers who watch this because they communicate me, some of them direct message me and say they really like this thought and that thought. So let's hope that you get some traction with this interview. But if someone does want to contact you, Angus, how do they go about doing that? Because I suspect there might be a few interested parties.
So you bring up a good point. We're talking about building up racing and the racing audience. So the other part of racing is obviously all the businesses that rely on racing. We're talking about the breeders, the auction houses, all the people who work in the industry, etc. So the way we've designed Triple Eight Racing, for example, is there's 8 teams. So our thinking is that each of those 8 teams should have a betting partner. Each of those 8 teams should have a breeding house partner. Each of those teams should have an auction house partner. So that is how, if the racing industry wants to get involved, they obviously want to talk to our new market, which is going to be predominantly black market. And the best way to talk to that market is to get involved with one of those teams, because then you have direct access to that market. So if you're a betting company, you can do the activation with your team, either live or on all their platforms. And instead of trying to go, okay, cool, I need to sponsor a whole event or the whole series, we're trying to make it accessible to as many different racing companies as possible. We want to bring the audience, and then it's up to the racing industries to sell themselves to that audience. So give these young guys a taste. I'm not sure if I should say this, but I think there's more than enough money for people to buy horses in this country. I think if you look at the cars that we see on the roads, the R1 million, the R2 million cars, I don't think having access to finance is a problem. I just think that people aren't interested in buying horses at the moment. So if we can make it more interesting, those people who can buy those R2 million or R3 million cars will go and buy a horse. We just have to go and make something interesting, Triple Eight Racing, and then the racing companies need to then access that market themselves and sell to those markets.
Angus, 2 final questions. First of all, one statement and one question. The question is, it strikes me that this could be a prototype for the rest of the world, because I've touched on it early on that South Africa is not the only one who are probably battling for their market share in terms of horse racing with other sports, other entertainment entities, because fundamentally that's what we should be. So if this works, one would imagine that it would work anywhere in the world.
Yeah, so I think we should also say that we are not the first and we're not the only ones looking at these kind of formats for racing. In the UK, there's 2 bodies. One is called City Racing and one is called the Racing League. And they are doing not exactly the same because they're not team-based, but they are short format series events, horse racing ideas that have gone to quite a fast stage. So that says 2 things to us. One, we're on the right track, but 2, we're not the only ones, i.e. South Africa, facing this problem. Globally, horse racing needs to reinvent itself. And whether we do it or these other racing bodies do it or these other companies do it, somebody at some point is going to address these issues.
Well, it strikes me that now is an excellent time to be talking and looking at this. With many of my guests, I've spoken about the reset button, which I think is probably well overdue. Leaving COVID even out of the equation, we were probably heading to this watershed stage in any event. And so it's a chance for us to relook and re-ask the question as you are, not to what do we want? What does Neil Andrews want, who's in his 50s, has been racing his whole life? It's what does the young black entrepreneur, female and male, want in their life? And can horse racing supply that to them? I think we know that if it is structured and proposed in such a way that it can. But at the moment, we're not doing that. So it's fascinating talking to you. I want your guarantee that you're going to stay in the loop with us. So every month or so, and hopefully less, you'll bring us up to date on the developments, because frankly, it's very exciting.
So Neil, I think what we're after, and this is what all sports businesses are after, there are three things that we need to succeed. We need broadcast partners, okay? So the super sports or whatever's paying money for that sport, okay? We need sponsors. And at the moment, horse racing has had the same sponsors who I think, thank God for those sponsors, because they've supported racing through thick and thin. But we need them to get more exposure. We need new sponsors. And then we need investment. And the only way we're going to get those three things, okay, is by creating a massive new audience. So that's what we have to do first. And that is our plan at the moment. If we can bring all these new people, social media, whatever, then we'll get those three things: the broadcast partners, the sponsors, then the investors. So I think we're all thinking along the same lines. Our view is this is how we think it can be done.
Angus Campbell, always a pleasure chatting to you. It's been very enlightening, exciting and fascinating. I think our viewers will find it the same. So Angus, thank you, and best of luck with it. It will be a challenge. I think you've already experienced that. It's likely to be, because there are some people, some entities that need a paradigm shift, but you know, adapt or die is the famous words. And at the moment, there is no doubt that racing is on a slippery slope. Angus Campbell, thank you very much for your time, and keep in touch with us here on Clocking the Gallop.
Thanks very much. We'll chat soon.